Cat looked at the tangled ball of yarn for 11 seconds.
Then Cat turned around, climbed into a cardboard box, and fell asleep in a warm patch of sun. The yarn was still solvable.
Cat still cared about it.
But something deep in Cat's brain had already decided the untangling could wait. That decision looked like laziness from the outside.
It wasn't. Why does a brain walk away from a problem it is fully capable of solving, and choose sleep instead? Cat's brain did not skip the yarn because Cat was tired in the ordinary sense. Cat's brain skipped the yarn because somewhere in the appraisal process, a quiet alarm went off. The knots looked bigger than they were. The threads looked more tangled than they were. And when a brain perceives a task as costing more energy than it has available to spend, it does not send Cat toward the task. It sends Cat toward the nearest exit. This is not a character flaw. It is a resource allocation decision, made below the level of conscious thought, by a brain that treats mental effort the same way it treats physical effort. Muscles that sense depletion do not keep sprinting out of willpower. They slow down to protect the body from collapse. The mind runs the same protective program. When the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for planning and problem solving, senses that its glucose and its patience are both running low, it does not announce this to Cat directly. It simply stops volunteering. And into that silence, the older, calmer parts of the brain step in with a much simpler suggestion. Rest first. Solve later. Researchers have watched this exact pattern for decades, in bodies far more complicated than a ball of yarn. Physicians George Engel and Arthur Schmale described something they called conservation-withdrawal, a built-in response where an organism facing an unsolvable or overwhelming situation shifts into a state of reduced activity and reduced engagement, almost like a system-wide power-saving mode. It was never framed as failure. It was framed as protection. The body, and the mind riding along inside it, choosing to conserve rather than to strain against a wall it cannot yet see a way around. Psychologist Roy Baumeister found something similar in the lab, though with far less yarn and far more radishes. In his early studies on what he called ego depletion, people who had just used mental effort to resist temptation performed worse on a completely unrelated problem-solving task right afterward. Their brains were not lazy. Their brains had simply spent a resource that needed refilling, and no amount of scolding could refill it faster. And neuroscientist Robert Sapolsky has spent much of his career explaining why stress hormones, in the wrong dose at the wrong time, quiet down exactly the part of the brain a difficult problem needs most. Under enough perceived pressure, the prefrontal cortex goes dim, and the oldest, most reflexive parts of the brain take the wheel instead. Those older parts do not know how to untangle a yarn. They only know how to find the nearest patch of sun. Picture the ball of yarn sitting exactly where Cat left it. It has not gotten worse. It has not gotten better. It is simply waiting, the way problems do, patient in a way that feels almost unfair. Cat, meanwhile, is curled inside a cardboard box 3 feet away, and the box is doing something the yarn cannot do. The box has walls. The box has a ceiling low enough to feel like a hand resting gently on Cat's back. The box asks nothing of Cat. The yarn asks everything. So the brain, given a choice between a small enclosed space that demands nothing and an open tangle that demands untangling, chooses the box every single time it feels depleted. The sunbeam matters too. It is not decoration. Warmth is one of the oldest signals a nervous system knows how to read as safe. A body curled in warmth is a body that has, for a moment, stopped bracing. And a brain that has stopped bracing is a brain that is finally allowed to do the thing it could not do near the yarn. It is allowed to rest. Not to avoid forever. Just long enough to come back with something left to give. This is why the nap is not the opposite of solving the problem. The nap is the quiet, unglamorous first step of solving it, the part that happens before any paw touches a single strand. None of this means the yarn stays tangled forever, and none of it means Cat should wait for perfect energy before trying again. It means the approach has to match how the brain actually works, not how anyone wishes it worked. Step 1. Notice the withdrawal without punishing it. When the pull toward the box shows up, that pull is information, not failure. It is a brain reporting that its current resources feel too low for the task in front of it. Step 2. Rest on purpose, with a limit.
A nap taken deliberately, with an endpoint in mind, restores far more than a nap taken out of collapse, because the nervous system knows it is allowed to come back out.
Step 3. Shrink the yarn before touching it.
Instead of facing the whole tangled ball, find one loose strand at the edge. The brain that fled from an entire knot will often approach a single thread without flinching.
Step 4. Let the first attempt be small enough to feel almost pointless.
One strand loosened is not the whole solution, but it proves to the brain that this particular tangle is not as fixed as it looked from across the room.
Step 5. Return to the sunbeam between attempts, not instead of them. Rest and effort are not opposites competing for the same hour.
They are partners taking turns, each one making the next one possible.
Cat is not broken for choosing the box over the yarn.
Cat's brain simply did what every brain does when a task looks bigger than the energy on hand.
It protected what little was left, so that later, with the sun still warm and the strands still waiting, there would be enough left to actually begin.
What tangled thing have you been avoiding lately, not because you don't care about it, but because some quiet part of you already knew you needed the box first?
The cat says thanks. Like this video. Toss him a subscribe. It keeps the yarn rolling.